In high seas or calm, where opportunity and risk lurk just below the surface. Answers require in-depth analysis. Welcome to BlackFin Group's Shark Cage podcast, where experts dip below the surface of important industry issues in search of hidden opportunities.
Good day, folks, and welcome to the Shark Cage, BlackFin's podcast series. My name is Keith Kemp, President and CEO at BlackFin Group. I will be your host today. To start, I want to thank our sponsors. A real special shout out to all our BlackFin preferred partners: Mortgage Flex, IE Mergent, Cloud Virga, Take 3 Technologies, Prudent AI, Finastra, Argyle, and the one and only LendingPad, and so many more, all just really doing great things for the lending industry. Okay, so let's get started here. Today, I'm really excited to have in the Shark Cage one of BlackFin's preferred partners, Dan Smith, Vice President of Sales and Strategy at LendingPad. Welcome, Dan. It's absolutely great to have you on today, man.
It's great to be here.
Cool. We're going to have some fun. But before we get into really some of our discussion today, I want to formally introduce you, Dan. Share a little bit about your background, just kind of shows you know what you're talking about when it comes to today's topic about loan origination software and what's going on in that market. Something kind of near and dear to my heart. Dan is a 25-year veteran of the mortgage banking industry. Prior to Dan's executive role at LendingPad, Dan was at Compliance Ease for 16 years, where he and I crossed paths at one point, where he wore countless hats as sales director and as sales SVP of sales and ran national sales. But prior to Compliance Ease, Dan was the lead product consultant at Fiserv. Pretty hefty role there, driving the product development of these sophisticated platforms. But he was really helping guide their overall technology strategy. Dan has a BA from Calvin University and pursued his MBA at Duke University's Fuke School of Business. Dan, it's absolutely great to have you here. So are you ready to jump in? I promise I won't bite, man. Maybe challenge you a little bit, but we should have some fun while we're at it.
I'm excited. Let's go.
Cool. All right, man. Well, Dan, so loan origination, as I mentioned, it's a software. You know, I've been on both sides, the lender side, the vendor side. I've had to, as a lender, pick a new system. As a lender, as a lender, I've had to pick a new system. As a vendor, I had to represent systems. And they're all very comprehensive. But as a consultant, I've really tried to focus on strategies to help lenders make the right decision, not be sold a system or buy a system without really eyes wide open. So understanding that little bit of background as it relates to me and how I see things with LOSs, what would you say are the 2 or 3 biggest challenges that lenders face today in the loan origination technology space? Whether someone's sitting on the technology they have, or they're considering making a move in the year 2024 or beyond. What would you say are those big challenges that they have internally?
Well, thanks, Keith. Great question. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges and you can take it different directions, but for starters, one of them, you kind of alluded to it, having been on both sides of it, there's a lot of choice. And you know, there's a lot of change as well. And you know, the mortgage industry hasn't been known as a tech forward industry relative to other industries, but that's beginning to change. There's a lot of enhancements and change coming into the space. But how do lenders navigate that and to know what's out there? So that would be one challenge. Another, and it's a bit related because it affects everything, is time, or the lack of time. And so that scarce resource obviously applies to all of us as humans in our personal life and any job, any industry. But from my perspective, I think it disproportionately impacts those of us that have made the mortgage industry our home because of just how cyclical it is. So last couple of years, a few years, we've had, really boom times with really high volumes. And, many people would say they didn't have time because it was all hands on deck just to keep the machinery moving. And then, as we all know, 500 bips later, and 16 months later, with rates are where they are, we're in this very much this down time. But even then, it might create some more time, but it also means that everyone's now scraping to fight for every dollar. And unfortunately, as a result of the contraction, there is less human capital in some instances. So people are stretched that much more thin. And so I think just the nature of it moving, the peaks and valleys, right, means that time is an ever precious commodity in the mortgage space. So, Keith, I think, correct me if I'm wrong in the statistics. I think, does BlackFin say it's like something like of the existing, because you asked about existing and new tech. So of existing tech, is it something like 60% of a tech stack is being utilized?
Yep.
Does that sound
Yep.
about?
Yep. Per the CIO magazine. Yep. 60%
Okay,
of
there we
systems
go.
are
Thank you.
actually used.
Yeah, I thought I remembered hearing that, from you all, and I was thinking about that a little bit. And so I guess to take your question first, again, from the challenges that lenders are facing, either from an existing standpoint, and then we'll talk about making a replacement or a new tech decision in a minute. But from an existing standpoint, I think there are a few different reasons why that stat is so underwhelming. And one of them, gets back to this. It's just kind of everyone has a day job. And so if you're looking at, how do we better utilize one's tech stack, it's really hard to ask people, either in the boom times or the down times, to focus not on whatever they have in front of them, but to take that knowledge and that their familiarity with the processes, and then look into their existing tech stack and further enhance it. And then another, from a I think a little bit more conventional wisdom standpoint, would be, there's a mismatch. The tech stack that we have doesn't apply to the needs that that we have, and in some cases that's true, and that you may have heavier tech than the organization needs, or it planned on expanding in some other areas and that never came to fruition, or what have you. But I think that's maybe not the full story either. In some cases, if I may, I think that, again, the technology can get in the way. In some cases, legacy systems are a little harder to administer. I think in some cases they could look at their existing tech stack and find that functionality that would help further them along exists, but it's just hard to unlock sometimes.
Yeah.
So, lots of challenges. That's on the existing side. From a new, the answer is not any simpler if you say, well, let's just just simply move to new tech. Again, everyone is then faced with probably spending more time on average than people do, on average, especially in the pre-onboarding discussions, or even the pre-sales discussions. So, from an onboarding standpoint, I know, again, BlackFin, and thank you for all the, the industry analytics, but you have a stat of 70% failure rates on onboarding. And as you point out, pointed out in other talks, that's not necessarily always a catastrophic fail. Sometimes it is, where it doesn't launch at all, but sometimes it's just over budget, behind schedule, somewhat inadequate. But that's a pretty, sobering number as well. And then you get back to the very first thing I mentioned, which is, how do you sort out what choice? And that's a difficult question to unpack as well.
Yeah, you bring up some really critically, important challenges that lenders. I think that's one of the reasons why, and we'll get it more into this and peel this onion back a little bit more here in a few minutes, but I think that's one of the reasons why lenders do get paralyzed in actually making the decision to move to a newer system, even though they know it's going to have those features and new functions and efficiencies, and managing the system, and processing loans through the system. It's going to have more of that look and flavor that you're so accustomed to on your phone, right? With an app. It can all be exciting, but at the same time, they can't measure the trade-off of all these challenges. the time that you mentioned. Do we have the time? Do we have the resources to appropriately analyze and try and choose the appropriate system? Do we have do we understand the requirements well enough in order to be able to fully optimize the system? Do we have a plan in place to make sure that it's going to implement successfully? I mean, those are all monumental challenges. And Dan, I mean, I don't know how you're seeing it on your end, but when you're talking to lenders about, the opportunity that you guys present with LendingPad, I have to imagine you're seeing that deer in the headlights and look from every one of these lenders who know they need to do something, but they're afraid to pull that trigger. And because of these monumental challenges, I mean, where have you seen success with lenders who finally said, we got to look at this responsibility and, we compartmentalize it and this is how we solve for that. All right. Do you have any key insights there as to what lenders are, doing, or is it just this, well, let's just, rip the Band-Aid off, just pray for luck and hopefully it goes well and we get some benefits out of the new system because our old system is just so bad, we've got to do something. I mean, that's not a healthy way of taking your approach to buying and implementing a new system, right?
Well, I started at LendingPad about 3 years ago, and thankfully LendingPad is very forward looking from a standards standpoint, and it's staying current with the industry. So, about that time we had the new IRLA come on board, and right out of the gate, I felt like I had a part-time counselor degree by hearing about, some other folks that were struggling with their tech stack. So that's kind of the extreme example. You don't want to be in that position where like, hey, I'm done. You want to be a little bit more thoughtful about it, but at the same time, I think you're kind of referring to kind of analysis paralysis and whatnot. It's good to have a lot of empathy for folks that are, kind of in that mode. And sometimes the right the right decision is to forestall some of those decisions and be strategic about, hey, am I okay right now? And can make a decision in, 6 months as to whether we hold up the existing tech stack or make a decision to another alternative, and if so, why? And I know Andrew on your team talks a lot about what are the goals, and that certainly applies. I had a call this week with a lender, and he's indicated to me that he really intends to move to LendingPad, and I believe he will. But he's doing it in a really thoughtful way, which again, it says why the time that you put into it is so valuable. We've talked to multiple calls with sales and processing and compliance, and we're talking to all these folks, and he kind of pulled me aside this week and said, hey, pretty much moving to you, but I really want the organizational exposure to try to begin to build some momentum and get that
The
buy-in.
change management part of it.
Absolutely. And actually, he, again, as hopefully all of us do, as we have spent a few more trips around the sun, he said, I'd done this prior and it was not, with that buy-in, and that created more friction. So definitely have to think, not only are you ready, or do you have someone allocated, but is it in a position where you can show, whatever improvements or purported improvements you're going to have to the organization.
It's a great advice, Dan. And it's actually one of the reasons why we have I personally am as a change management expert and having implemented so many systems. That's why our BlackFin University has a change management course for leadership, because we're in direct, I mean, we didn't talk about this previously, but we're in direct sync with you that it all relies on your change management, the ultimate success of an implementation. So I think your what is to be a new client is spot on with that. So I love that. Well, let me transition, if I could, to my next question. So if we talked about the challenges of the new systems, and we talked about a couple of the best practices of how they need to be thinking about that, what would you say? So we gave that one extreme where they're literally pedaling to keep their LOS on versus, we know we need to buy a new LOS and we're going to try and take more appropriate, responsible steps to make sure it's a successful implementation. For those large part of those people that are in the middle who are saying, I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do and I don't know what to be looking for. What would you say? Because I know LendingPad is I mean, I'm not just saying this, I know this for a fact. You guys really are taking things to the next level generationally from an origination technology standpoint. So I'm really intrigued by what insights you provide here. But what are the new table stakes for being an effective LOS? Like I said, we have a lot of old technology out there that just keeps putting lipstick on that pig, either through renaming the system, reskinning it, or through an acquisition, but they still have the awful and painful implementation and system management administration process that requires 4 people to manage the LOS. And yes, at the same time, we have a lot of great newer technologies coming to market, but what are those 2, 3, 5 things that are really the new table stakes to say, I know I'm moving to a good new system with one of these decisions because they have these new table stakes incorporated within their origination technology. So what say you, Dan?
Great question. And to a certain extent, Keith, the answer is it depends. In that sometimes one person's table stakes is another, person's nice to haves. And so again, harkening back to
Fair.
BlackFin's advice, like what are your goals here? That being said, I have extra spring in my step because we're building cool things and we're doing so in concert with our clients and working within this industry that that we know and love. I think that a number of things have emerged as table stakes or standards for new LOS technology. One of them, if I may, would be is it cloud-based? Just being cloud-based. From that vantage point, as is the case with most things, it's not just a do you have it, do you not have it? Then like what's behind it? What's your latency? What's the reliability? What's the security behind it? Was it born in the cloud? That certainly makes things easier if things are natural from a streamlined developmental standpoint. All of those things. Another, I think it's fair to say the industry has sort of created an expectation for LOSs to have really truly a good functional POS component. At LendingPad, we have excellent partners and some best of breed partners that we love to refer business to, that we have great integrations to. But we also have a LendingPad POS component. So again, that's a discussion for what are people's needs or what they're looking for. But I feel like that's also emerged. This next one's probably the most important from my perspective, and it's a big word that has a lot of implications, but compliance. Again, very much, and I know I haven't heard you raving about sort of the old school RFP approach to evaluating technology. We don't necessarily rave about it either, and especially because what it lends itself is, do you have XYZ? Yes, 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 right? But if you check yes for certain elements, what's really behind that? And in our case, for example, it's been years in the making to have the really areas that you can't kind of cut corners around. So we have on board, you mentioned my background. I have years of experience from compliances, but we have leaders from compliances that are now here at LendingPad. We have the founders of Mavent, our LendingPad employees now working on this. We have, someone who's a senior person, having been at the CFPB, where she's trained many of the field examiners working on this project, external attorneys and other input. So we're really dedicated to compliance. And that's, in some cases, some of what newer technology, that's the type of areas where newer technology misses out on. And so what's exciting, for us is to be newer technology where we have kind of that heavy duty input from really industry heavy hitters. And then maybe one or two others. I'm sure there's many more, but for the purposes of our conversation, a couple more for now. One would be, and they're related. One would be, is it easy to configure? Straightforward to administer, to have an administrator. The reason I say that is there's a lot that can be unlocked if it can be unlocked in a sensible, intuitive way where it's supported. And that also gives a lot of indirect cost savings, which, with the per loan 11, 12, 13,000 dollar fee that we're at right now or cost to originate a loan, that's certainly welcome. But then, and I would add one more, and that's the infrastructure side to it. So does the new technology have the infrastructure behind it, or is it just kind of an attractive UI?
Yeah.
Because that's going to have long-term consequences.
Oh, you're spot on, and I love the way you said that about because I was about to call you on that. Yeah, I mean, it can be in the cloud, but that doesn't mean it's actually in the cloud. And you said that just brilliantly by saying, was it born in the cloud? And that's a key table stake right there, because that in itself tells you how agile the system can be from a development, from a configuration, from a integration standpoint. I mean, if it's not born in the cloud, you're going to face significant constraints on any of those fronts. And then to say compliance, that's you're kind of, it's music to my ears. I remember implementing a large regional lender at one point, and to kick off the project, I was interviewing the head of compliance, and she said it so beautifully. She was like, "Keith, compliance should be invisible. The rules are black and white. There's just some nuances where you want to maybe make an override. So call out those 10% or that 5%, but don't be having to look at everything, since compliance is black and white." So your this would be music to her ears to hear what you guys are doing from that compliance standpoint. It is the crux of it all, and it really does speed up your ability to skip steps or check the checker costs, etc., that are just burdening organizations. So just great insights there, and the opportunity for integration, as you said, that's half of it. That's why you can have so many partners, because you're born in the cloud, you're agile in your development. I know you guys are building at the speed of light because of your core infrastructure of your system. So that's just, again, key table stakes for lenders and listeners to be thinking about when they're considering going out and looking for a new LOS. Asking the right questions about the infrastructure, as you said, Dan. I think that was just great advice from that standpoint. And those are very poignant new table stakes for the loan origination market. So let me ask you, Dan, can you share some examples? We talked a little bit about the problem. We talked about, the table stakes. Can you share some examples of what are those benefits that lenders are really going to be able to grab onto, be able to really, realize by moving to a new LOS that has these new table stakes? I mean, I think of some of these systems that have come out here in, the last decade, and they talk about the new GUI, and people are kind of like excited about it. But the administrative components of it are exhausted, and the vendors don't even know this until they actually get live, and they go, "Oh, now I got to hire a staff to manage this system." I mean, I didn't anticipate that annual cost, and for a credit union or a community bank, that could break their back. Or cease implementation as they get ready to get closer to going live, because of these new realities that they didn't get weren't transparent at the beginning, and they weren't fully aware of. So with that said, sorry, for all the lead up, but what would you say are some of the benefits these new standards within these systems are bringing to lenders? What are you seeing right out the gate with clients like yours?
Great question. And from the moment that new system is implemented, and obviously you've done all the diligence and you had set your goals and you know what you're trying to accomplish, and from that, I would say first of all, there's an immediate benefit in that now you can go and recruit and expand and talk to LOs and say, hey, this is what we have over here, because it's really hard to try to tell them that you have an exciting growing organization, and then you show them old tech, or they had to be trained on old tech, or they were on that 2 companies ago and remembered kind of some trouble with support or what have you. So making a choice of new tech applied properly is an immediate message, not to mention the efficiency and the benefit and quality of life that goes behind it.
Mm.
Another immediate benefit is not just from a recruiting, but I think it sends the message across to the whole organization that that you've made that investment, that you are a forward-looking organization, you're preparing for the future. And so even from some messaging and growth standpoints, there can be some benefits that accrue. But once you get things operational, which is the hard work, there first is a little dip from hopefully a little dip from efficiency.
Usually it is,
and the
yeah.
efficiencies really kick in, and from that standpoint, you would have scoped out what it is that you're cutting out, what processes are you moving more quickly in terms of automated reporting and quality of the data and your workflow moving faster and so forth. From a little bit of a more midterm, long-term standpoint, if you have been thoughtful in your selection and you have built trust in your partner, then you can spare yourself from some of the changes that you're having to go through right now. And I'll give you an example from LendingPad. We've quadrupled in the last 3 years, but it's still all organic growth, for the most part. And so as we've done so, we are determined and will continue to grow to not make the same mistakes as some of today's legacy systems, which had been really advanced technology for the time, but then have now become harder to be updated and harder to evolve. And so if you have that right foundation, whereas some of the new tech that we see coming in, it has a little bit more dead end coding where it might be really impressive here in 2024, but they're not going to set themselves up for as much malleability or ability to kind of cope with changes and be 2030 technology in 2030. So if you've done so, then you can scale faster and scale longer down the line and be able to adjust to other changes that the industry throws at you or technology affords you the opportunity to take advantage of.
Wow. Oh, now that is truly a gold mine there of benefits. But I really like what you said there at the beginning. Folks, don't lose sight of, we all acknowledge it's hard work to get live, but you have to begin with the end in mind. And it is so that you have that agility and that flexibility of a key system that you can build your foundation on. And, that's what I love about what you guys are doing, Dan, is because you don't hesitate to partner with anybody. Hey, if you feel like that's a better, point of sale system, we certainly can respect that. We understand that if that's your little differentiators as a lender, then we'll support that. And but not every LOS is willing to do that because they're hard coded. Oh, we don't want to get into that because they don't have the agility in their system to allow you to do that. So very eye-opening. I mean, really great benefits and key points there, Dan. So just before I wrap this up, any other key points that you'd want to highlight, or something else that we didn't cover that was kind of hot on your list that you want to make sure you emphasized?
Well, again, first of all, we're glad to be partnering with you. You're doing something pretty unique and innovative on many fronts. but it's undergirded with people that are respected, have experience, and so forth. But it also just innovation. Like one of the challenges that we face, or any newer technology, and we've been around 9 years, so we're not new, but still people don't in many cases know kind of what we've added lately or what we're up to, is we don't have there's not an obvious place for folks to go and get information beyond kind of what people have always done. And so, for example, I approached I think trade organizations or trade associations have their place, but the question is, what's their criteria for preferred vendor partners and such? I approached one and said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about what LendingPad has done and what we're doing by way of efficiency gains and saving your members some money and things like that. And they said, oh, we don't really want to hear your story because our dance card is full of legacy LOSs already, and so it kind of perpetuates what lenders already knew those names. There were and so forth. But with quick shout out to the BlackFin tech stack navigator, really I think democratizes the process some, and it can be transformational because we're talking about short long-term benefits. Ultimately, besides financial metrics, you should have a cultural goal in mind. And if you've chosen the right partner, that's part of that, because you boost morale and you can set up themes where it can have your software look like your website and your office, and you can have customer service at the same levels that you expect your team to provide customer service to the borrowers. And so that's a little bit more of an esoteric benefit, but perhaps the biggest, because technology will change, but people matter most, and relationships in this business are why this industry ultimately is so rewarding to be in.
Amen. Very well said. And I certainly didn't pay you to endorse us. I appreciate that. But that is the essence of what our tech stack navigator and preferred partner relationships are designed to do, is to make sure that we're putting, the right vendor in a successful position with the right lender. And that's really listening to the 20% that really matters. Because as you mentioned earlier in the call, Dan, 80% of this stuff, I mean, you can't call yourself an LOS if it doesn't already do that. That's why these RFPs are out of date. They're no longer relevant. They're not true. They just say yes to everything and wait to answer the question on the phone. Just there's too many holes in that process, and I think that's why we see so eye to eye on so many fronts, and we enjoyed meeting with you guys every month as we've gotten to know you and learn more about your commitment to service, your commitment to quality, your commitment to providing best in class technology. Those are all the core pillars of being a preferred partner with BlackFin. So we're honored to work with you and appreciate that shout out. But it's vendors like you that make this a lot of fun. So really enjoyed this time, Dan. I really appreciate your being with us today and joining me in the shark cage. It wasn't too tough on you, I don't think. Maybe we'll do that next time around. But folks, this has been a tremendous discussion on the new standards of loan origination software today. I know lenders are going to be really appreciative of these key insights that you shared, Dan. And congratulations on the amazing success you guys are having at LendingPad. I know you just have a great leadership team, great support team, and you're committed to your client success. I mean, we're talking about a platform that serves all sizes of brokers, credit union, banks, right, Dan?
It does.
It's very cool. And for someone like me who's been talking about loan origination systems and implementing them for well over 20 years, it's so refreshing to see what you guys are doing, how you're setting that new standard for LOSs. Folks, don't hesitate to learn all about how LendingPad is helping lenders by going to their website at www.lendingpad.com, lendingpad.com, and reaching out to Dan and his team. Until next time, this has been another exciting episode in the Shark Cage. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us in the Shark Cage. To be a guest on a future episode, send an email to info@blackfin-group.com. To find out more about the show or the information provided in this episode, visit BlackFin Group online at www.blackfin-group.com.